The hormone that built your career on is disappearing, and almost no doctor will connect it to why you've hit a wall at work. You've had days where you sit at your desk, laptop open, trying to start work you actually enjoy, and you just can't. Nothing seems to pull you towards starting a project or just answering an email. Most of us call this burnout. But typical burnout usually gets better with a vacation or a job change. This feeling doesn't. Dropping and fluctuating estrogen affects how motivated you are. What probably is new to you is the fact that for years, estrogen has been the silent manager of your dopamine system. By the end of this video, you will understand what dopamine is, how estrogen controls it, and 3 major things you can do to get more dopamine. Every time I explain a part of the puzzle throughout the video, I'm going to give you a small action to trigger a release of dopamine. I'm Dr. Jura Lasas. I'm a neuroscientist and the brain fascinates me. I've also spent more than 15 years in clinical research, helping small biotechs get new medicines to patients. This is personal. I'm also trying to understand what is going on in my perimenopausal brain and how I can still perform to my full potential at work. Most of us have been taught to put estrogen in one very specific box. It's for periods, fertility, and eventually menopause. But while that box is real, it's a small fraction of the work estrogen actually does in your body. In the world of neuroscience, estrogen is a neuromodulator. Think of it as a dial that tunes how brain functions. It's constantly adjusting the settings in almost every region of your brain that matters for thinking, focusing, and staying motivated. Estrogen has receptors in your prefrontal cortex, your executive brain, in your hippocampus, that's your memory hub, and amygdala, your emotional alarm system. But most importantly for us today, estrogen has receptors sitting right on the neurons that produce dopamine. For your entire adult life, estrogen has been tuning your brain in the background. You didn't have to think about it. You've been ovulating, your hormones rising and falling in a predictable rhythm, and your brain has built its operating style around that rhythm. Your cognitive sharpness you've spent 20 or 30 years developing in your career was constructed on a foundation of stable hormonal signals. In perimenopause, that stability goes away, and the change doesn't follow a simple, gentle slope downward. Long before menopause, estrogen starts fluctuating wildly. It's chaotic. Some days very high, some days very low, with no predictable pattern. You can have estrogen swings in a single week that are more intense than the ones you used to experience across your entire month. It's this instability itself that disrupts your brain long before the levels actually stay low. Now, let's look at the other player, dopamine. Most people think dopamine is about pleasure. Dopamine is actually about anticipation and motivation. It's the chemical in your brain that is released before something good happens. It's the signal that tells your brain a task is going to be worth the effort. Quick pause. If you just had a moment of, wait, I thought dopamine was the reward of pleasure, that little click you felt is actually dopamine in action. Your brain just released a pulse because you received information that contradicted what you already believed. Neuroscientists call that a prediction error. And it's one of the fastest ways to activate your dopamine system on purpose. That was your first hit of this video. Keep an eye out. I'll point out the others as we go. So we have our 2 main characters, estrogen, the silent tuner of your brain, and dopamine, your brain's go chemical, the signal that you feel is going to be worth starting something. The connection between estrogen and dopamine is incredibly direct. Estrogen is physically present at the manufacturing site of your dopamine, sitting on the cells that make it. Your dopamine system has been running with estrogen looking over its shoulder for your entire adult life. The two have been intertwined the whole time. So what happens when estrogen starts fluctuating wildly? The dopamine-making neurons that have been calibrated for decades to operate with a stable estrogen suddenly have to function without a predictable estrogen signal. Parts of the dopamine system start to break. 3 specific parts in particular. And once you see what those 3 things are, you can see exactly why that wall at work feels so impossible to climb. Estrogen influences dopamine in 3 ways, and I call these 3 jobs that estrogen is doing: make, keep, and hold. Estrogen has been doing all 3 at the same time every day for most of your adult life. When estrogen starts fluctuating, all 3 start to fail at the same time. Let me take you through each one. Job 1 is make. Estrogen helps your brain make dopamine in the first place. When estrogen is stable, dopamine production is running well. When estrogen drops, dopamine production drops with it. Less estrogen, less dopamine being made. Job 2 is keep. Once dopamine is made, the neuron that made it releases it into a tiny gap to reach the next neuron, the one the message is meant for. The signal lasts for a brief window, and then a tiny protein called the dopamine transporter pulls back the dopamine out of the gap, like a vacuum. Estrogen slows that vacuum down. When estrogen is stable, dopamine stays in the gap a little longer and the signal has more time to register. When estrogen drops, the vacuum speeds up and dopamine gets pulled away too quickly. So now you have less dopamine being made, and what gets made is swept away before it can fully do its job. Job 3 is hold. When dopamine reaches the receiving neuron, that neuron has to actually register it. Estrogen maintains the sensitivity of the dopamine receptors in your prefrontal cortex specifically. When estrogen is stable, those receptors are fully sensitive. When estrogen fluctuates, the receptors are not as sensitive. The signal arrives at the receiver, but the receiver is not paying attention the way it used to. Put those 3 things together. Less dopamine is being made, faster cleanup of what gets made, and reduced sensitivity of the receiving neuron. All 3 make, keep, and hold get affected at the same time. Now, I want you to do something. Pick one thing you've already completed today. Anything at all. A project you finished, an email you sent, the coffee you made this morning. Pick one specific thing and write it down. Then mark it as done. Either cross it off or check the box. Are you done? Good. That small act of closure just activated the exact dopamine circuit we have been talking about. Your brain made dopamine. Your prefrontal cortex registered the completion. You felt a tiny pulse of, yes, that was worth doing. You can use this little dopamine release trick on purpose throughout your working day. Mark what you complete consciously, out loud, or in writing. Do it on purpose. Most high-achieving women are racing towards the next thing the moment one task is done. I get it, I'm one of them. However, we don't give the brain's dopamine circuit a second it needs to register the closure. You're leaving free dopamine on the table. Stop doing that. Before we move on, I'd love for you to subscribe to my channel. It helps you stay updated with my videos, and honestly, every time it helps you stay updated with my videos, and honestly, every new subscriber gives me a little dopamine boost that keeps me motivated to create new content every week. As we discussed, estrogen has receptors all over your brain. The dopamine neurons reach out to many regions of the brain. But why do you hit the wall at work? Why not lose your balance or your sense of smell? It's because your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that handles executive function, is the most dopamine-dependent structure you have. All the things you do at work every day, planning, making decisions, starting a complex task, and staying focused under pressure, rely on a steady background level of dopamine called tonic dopamine. Your dopamine system has two modes of functioning. The first one is called phasic dopamine. Phasic dopamine is the spike, the pulse you get when something specific is happening right now. A Slack notification pings. Someone laughs at your joke. Each one of those is a phasing spike of dopamine. The second mode is tonic dopamine. Tonic dopamine is the steady background level of dopamine that is always there, quietly running underneath everything you do. It is not a spike. It is a baseline hum. When tonic dopamine functions as it's supposed to, your executive brain is ready when you need it. You sit down at your laptop and you have enough motivation to start working. Your go signal is functioning just fine. Now, layer estrogen onto this. When estrogen drops in perimenopause, the prefrontal cortex loses tonic dopamine tone faster than almost any other brain region. Your phasic dopamine spikes are still happening. You can still feel a small lift when a meeting goes well or your kid sends you a funny picture. But the baseline, the steady hum that used to make your executive brain just available, is no longer there the same way. The system that's struggling in your brain right now is your anticipation system. Your pleasure system is actually fine. You still enjoy your work once you get going, and you still feel good when it's finished. What's weakened is the pull. That's the go signal telling your brain the effort will be worth it before you even start. When estrogen drops and make, keep, hold mechanisms start falling, the tonic dopamine doesn't do its job well anymore. So you sit at your laptop and there is nothing pulling you toward the work. However, when you push through the gap and begin the work, the systems that handle the work itself are mostly intact. The gap is where you hit the wall. Now, I want you to test something. Think of a song you absolutely love. Just imagine the opening notes. Think of the melody, maybe the words where you would feel bursting out singing. Did you feel something just then? A small lift, maybe a slight lean forward. That was a little dopamine hit, but the song never actually played. Just anticipating a song your brain knows and loves is enough to nudge the dopamine circuit. But in real life, we can go even further. This is your third action to get dopamine going. If you have a task you've been avoiding, don't just sit down and grind. Take 1 or 2 minutes and actually play music you love, not the background study music. No, the real, I want to sing this music. Then start the task while your dopamine hit is still active. You're forcing your biology to work for you. We've talked about estrogen and dopamine in this video. There's a second layer involving chronic stress and cortisol that makes this hit high-achieving women even harder. But that deserves its own video. Watch this space. You have already done 3 small things in this video that activated your dopamine system on purpose. The prediction error click, the completion ritual, the music priming. Those are tools for getting through the day. They do not rebuild the dopamine system underneath. Let me give you the moves that do. The most powerful lever you can pull is aerobic exercise. running, cycling, swimming, an intense fitness class, anything that gets your heart rate up. Aerobic exercise is the only intervention I know of that directly targets all three of estrogen's lost jobs. It supports make, keep, and hold. The dose that comes up consistently in research is about 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity aerobic workouts. The second lever is to protect real cognitive demanding work instead of retreating from it. It's tempting when motivation drops to step back from the hard projects and fill your days with simpler admin tasks. The problem is that your brain builds and maintains dopamine-rich circuits by using them. So rather than abandoning hard work, deliberately ring-fence it. The shorter blocks of intense work, do cognitively demanding work earlier in the day with fewer distractions. You're telling your brain, we still do this, and giving your dopamine system a reason to stay online. The third lever is sleep, and specifically deep sleep. Dopamine receptor sensitivity, the whole job, gets restored every night during slow wave sleep. When your sleep is disrupted, the overnight reset stops happening. So you wake up with receptors that did not get their nightly tune-up. Please check my videos on sleep. It's a big topic. For now, protecting your sleep is not just about feeling rested in the morning. You're actively maintaining dopamine at the neuronal level. So the wall you have been hitting in your 40s has a biological cause. Your estrogen is in chaos. Your dopamine system is losing three mechanisms: make, keep, hold. Your prefrontal cortex is trying to perform under concert hall lights that keep dimming. That is the picture. And biology is something you can work with. We talked about small actions for your day-to-day. Mark your completions on purpose, out loud or in writing. Play music you love before tasks you have been avoiding. And I also gave you 3 structural levers to pull on for the long game: aerobic exercise, protected deep work, better sleep. Your edge is still yours. It was built on top of a biological signal that has started to change. Now you know the signal and you can work with it. If you made it this far, your dopamine system is clearly still working. Give it one more tiny hit. Like, subscribe, and tell YouTube this is the kind of content ambitious women actually need. See you next time.